time and time again, and that is, how long have I been an artist and how did I become an artist? Well, the normal answer for me is that I don't really think of myself as an artist, but I tell people how I was brought up to draw. My father taught me how to observe things, how to draw them, to make them realistic, to make them represent what we were looking at, and then art's always played a part in my working life since. But he did say to me, whatever you do, don't go into art, because you'll always be poor. Because he reckoned you needed to either be a complete genius or you had to know the right people. Which sort of makes a lot of sense, especially, it did especially make sense in those days, which was quite a long time ago, a few decades. And so consequently, I didn't go into art. And I went to work in other jobs. I found that time and time again I'd be asked to make use of my artistic skills, my drawing skills, my graphic skills, just my creative skills in general. Not normally for any formal pay, but I would have thank yous and the occasional box of chocolates. However, it was a very useful skill to have in many of my jobs. And I still find it useful today. It wasn't really until I decided to go off in a new direction completely, away from business and the world of commerce and retail and buying and the service industry. I decided that I really would like to have done something within science. That was back in 2007, and I decided to have a look and see what options there were for me. I was lucky to find a course, a degree course, which was being run from Haverfordwest, from Pembrokeshire College, with the University of Glamorgan, and I enrolled on that course, and it was called the Coastal Zone and Marine Environment Studies. I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed that. I could have carried on with it for years, forever. But what surprised me actually was that I was thinking I was leaving art behind and that science was going to be a completely different road. And much to my surprise, within a very short space of time, a week, two, I turned up at a field trip a little bit late, and the lecturer handed me a clipboard with a piece of paper, and he said, I've asked everyone in the class to look out over the Cleddau Estuary and to draw what we could see in terms of the landscape. Then we were to try and identify the features, the habitats within that scene. Well, drawing the habitat was second nature to me. That was really easy, and I shocked the lecturer actually. He was really surprised when he saw mine. I didn't think anything of it, and of course the students were saying to me, oh, could you do mine for me please? Could you do mine? I just took it for granted. It was an easy thing for me to do. But the important thing was that not only was I exercising the skills I'd learnt from my father about being an artist, about not just looking, but seeing, observation, and not thinking, not seeing with your brain. So what I mean by that is you look and then your brain tells you what you're seeing. We all do this. Great example of that is children when they're in early years of school or at home. You ask them to draw a house, draw their house, and in most cases they'll put the windows in right in the corners of the house, right up in the corners, because their brain is saying to them, those windows are somewhere near the edges of the building for some reason. Of course, if they looked at the house, they'd see that those windows are not in the corners and up on the edges. But something funny happens within our brains, and our brains tell us what we're seeing. So one of the first disciplines of becoming an artist is to look and really open your brain to seeing what your eyes are allowing in, transmitting in. And then you've got a chance of being able to draw that scene, that object, whatever it is, more closely to how it is being seen. So going back to what I was saying about the story about drawing the estuary, the creek we were stood at, I was able to do that. I was able to distinguish between different shapes and different textures, and get the balance and the perspective reasonably okay within that scene. But that became enriched then when the lecturer started explaining about those habitats, why they were where they were, how they related to each other, what difference they made to the ecology, the animals, the living things, insects, all organisms that lived within that space that we were looking at. So suddenly my art was being complemented by the science. And I've come to believe that art and science complement each other. The artist sees with the eye of an artist. Sometimes that means we are sensitive to contrasts, whether that's texture, light, dark, movement, and questioning. I think that can be very useful for science, and for an artist to get a greater depth of understanding of what they're drawing, in the case of a natural environment, say, then that potentially can enhance the impact of that art that's being created, just with that extra understanding of the way of things, the natural things. And it's inspiring as well, even more so than just seeing, to understand what you're looking at from a scientific point of view. And this is what eventually inspired me to paint in earnest in 2010. And I'll explain further about that, what happened on that new road of painting, which has really sort of identified me as an artist within the public eye. Okay, we're just checking again for position. Zoomed in a little bit more, and I thought I'd show you this in true Ronnie Corbett style. This clapperboard my dad made for me. Now I'm not sure what year it was, I haven't written it on there, but he made that in the days when I was in Tasker School for Girls, and I was really keen on the idea of making a film. Didn't have any cameras. It would have been a cine camera then, but I didn't have any equipment. But I had ideas of gathering my friends together and making a spooky film. We lived out in the countryside and by the river, just outside Haverfordwest, and it would often be really misty down by that river. I thought that would make the perfect location for a spooky film for me and my friends from Tasker School for Girls. I was always getting them up to things. Anyway, never did make the film, but here I am a few years later, playing with a camera, video camera, and boy hasn't the technology changed since then. There we are. So there's my clapperboard. Take two. Okay. My head was a little bit too close to the top in the last one. So I'm going to try this now. What can I talk to you about? Okay, well, would you like to draw this? The starfish. You might think this is a real one, because it's that good, isn't it? And this is drawn with pastel chalks and well, maybe a soft pencil for some of the shading. But importantly, I started with a sheet of paper or card that looks just like sand. So that made my life a lot easier, and I think it made the end result that more effective, more impactful and more 3D. So yeah. Hi, here's a question I get asked quite often. How do you start your paintings? How long does it take you to do them? Anyway, so I thought I'd share with you how I go about creating one of my paintings. Some of them are quite large, but that's not really important. I'm quite a fast painter, and so if it doesn't come together within the first couple of days, say, the most, then I'm likely to move on to something new. That's not because I'm impatient, it's just that's the way my brain works when it comes to reproducing that image that I've set in my head. And again, that's another clue as to how I go about things. I'm not good when it comes to preparing in advance for any paintings. I tend to lose the essence the more I prepare. So the first thing I'll do, unless I have something pop into my head, some inspiration already, I'll go and look for inspiration. And what helps me with that is that I have already prepared a folder on my computer of images that I've seen that inspire me. And that might be because of the subject matter, it might be the visual impact, which could be down to colours, contrasts, depth, form. So there's no strict rule as such, it's just what inspires me is that as an image or elements of an image that I can put together and create composition with, that makes me want to pick up those paints and put them on the palette and put the brush to the canvas. So that's how I start out, and normally I build a composition in my mind. I may sketch something simple on a piece of paper, but it won't be much at all. It'll really be a rough outline of elements within the composition, and even then I won't stick strictly to that through the painting process. But it's a starting point, but I daren't go any further than that. Otherwise, I'm likely to like that sketch more than I will like the final painting. That's no lie. So that's how I start out, really. Now, when it comes to beginning that painting, putting paint to canvas, I like to start with the background, a backdrop, because for me then the pleasure of adding the subject matter, the elements that are going to come together for this composition, the pleasure I get from that grows and grows as a result of laying down this background. And it means that I can tone and blend whatever I add in, depending on what that background is on any particular space within that canvas, because it won't be just a plain background. I will start with a background that has a light source, and a lot of my work is underwater work, but it doesn't really matter whether it's underwater or if you're looking out at the sky, or with any composition. It could be a room, but it's starting with that, where's the light going to come from, and where will the darkest corners be. And so my background will be painted in a graduated way, starting from the brightest, lightest, maybe whites, through to the darkest, deepest depths. And I suppose what that helps me with then, as I add the other elements, is it gives that painting depth. And then that helps with creating the feeling of movement. I'm sure there are many questions out there that you'd like to ask, but one of them might be, where do I start? I want to be able to draw, paint, use whatever materials you like, really. But where do I start? So I've always loved art, and I've always wanted to be able to draw, but there's just such a big area, and there's so many different tools out there designed to help. Where do I start? Well, I'm going to go right back to basics and say to you that where maybe you could start is to become conscious wherever you are, wherever you're sitting, walking, indoors, outdoors, is to start training yourself, not just to look, but to see. Spend a little bit more time consciously looking at your view and asking yourself, what am I actually seeing? And it is a discipline. It is something that you can train yourself to do. But why do this? Well, because if you get used to doing that, it will help you when it comes to reproducing on paper or canvas the image that you would really like to do. And it will more than likely help you towards being happy, at least happy, if not pleased and delighted by your end result. But it's about practice, it's about discipline, and it's about being conscious and asking yourself consciously, what am I looking at here? What shape is it? Where is it in relation to other things? What difference does it make to the way it looks? Which angle I'm looking at it, whether it's bright, dark, the light, whether it's wintry, moody, warm, light, summery. There's so many different elements to consider when you're looking at something, asking why it looks the way it does. But as I say, it's just a discipline, training yourself to see, not just look. Now, when it comes to your drawing, painting, you'll want to decide what your main focus will be within that image that you're going to create. So your main focus, this will be something that your eye will be constantly drawn back to after it's travelled around the image, and you want it to do that too. So if you follow this way of thinking and you create movement within your painting, then that's what will happen. Your eye will continually explore that image you've created, but it will all depend on your main focus. Your eye will keep going back to that. So I'd say it's really important to consider what the surrounding environment will be for your main focus. So firstly, you're thinking, what's the main focus of my painting, my picture? And then think about what environment and surroundings will that be set in. And then what we can then think about is, once you've got those elements in, how can you make it more impactful, or make that composition stronger, so that your eye is virtually stuck to that picture and can't stop exploring it. And there are practical ways that you can enhance your artwork to help that happen. And it is really basically down to form, which you can create with light and dark, light and shadow, and different tones. But yeah, it's really exciting.